Hey everyone, and welcome to an episode of Learn to Play Piano with Charlie, where today we're going to be talking about dynamics. And dynamics are basically how loudly or softly something is played. But it goes way, way deeper than that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the things you can do to help improve your dynamics in your playing. And this applies mainly to the piano for the sake of this thing. This is Learn to Play Piano after all. But you can also apply some of these things to other instruments and things as well, because a lot of these are kind of overarching concepts. All right, before we start though, you know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff. It helps the algorithm. Hit the like button too. Smash it. Smash the like button. All right, let's get started. So dynamics, in a very, very simple form, is how loud or soft you play something. So like this would be forte maybe. And this would be piano maybe, or quiet. And this might be pianissimo, which is two pianos. So piano is quiet, forte is loud. Fortissimo, which is two Fs, is louder. Fortissimo is three Fs, louder even. And you can go up to like four Fs, and there's probably more too, but it kind of maxes out mainstream at like 3 or 4. Same with piano. You can go down to like 3 or 4 pianos, and the more pianos, the quieter. Then there's like mezzo piano, which is like medium piano. So it's a little bit louder than piano, but not as loud as a forte. And then there's mezzo forte, which is a little bit louder still, but not as loud as a forte. But basically, the key point of dynamics is that there's no one set like decibel level of what a particular thing is. So it's not like piano is 20 decibels and forte is 30. It doesn't work like that. It all comes down to being relative. And that's one of the key points I want to make today, is that dynamics are relative. You could argue that they're partially absolute, but for a large part and for a lot of circumstances, you can kind of think of them as being relative. So let me explain what I mean by that. If you're playing a piece, let's just play a little piece here. I just made that up. It sounds very sweet. It's basically piano or maybe pianissimo or something like that. But let's say that there was a middle part that got loud, but it didn't get that much louder. That louder part is louder than the first part, but it might not be what you would write as forte, right? It got a little louder, it was more involved, a little bit intense, but then it kind of calmed back down. So if the first part was pianissimo, let's say, that louder part maybe was a mezzo piano, maybe a mezzo forte, right? But I played it a good deal louder. But you wouldn't necessarily write it was forte because that might give the wrong feel. So dynamic markings can not only affect the decibel level, but it can affect the feel of a piece. And keeping in mind, they are basically relative. So if you're playing a piece that where the whole thing is pretty much piano and similar, right? Like pretty quiet. And you get to a part where it's just a little louder. Maybe they write it as mezzo piano for the first time, but that's like the loudest in the whole piece. You might be able to play it decibel-wise as loud as maybe a forte part in a piece that goes all the way up to 4 fortes, fortissimo, right? And that would be okay. So it's important to keep in mind that dynamics are relative. Now, on the piano, and this applies again to a lot of other instruments, of course, but on the piano, there are kind of absolute loudest and softest dynamics that you can play. At a certain point, no matter how hard you're pounding on the piano, you're going to kind of reach a sound level ceiling. You could be, you might be able to get a little louder, but it's going to be, at a certain point, if you're pounding, you can be playing pretty loud, and you're kind of going to hit a ceiling. You're not going to be able to play much louder than the loudest the piano is going to be able to do. And that could partly be determined by how it's balanced and the size of the piano, stuff like that. But there's kind of a limit, right? Likewise, there's a lower limit. And on a piano, the lower limit generally happens when the hammer stops hitting the string. So, the hammer's hitting the string. I'm going to play and then get quieter and quieter. So you can hear that at that kind of a point, it wasn't consistent, right? It was like bam, bam, bam. So basically, I was right at the cusp of the hammer not even touching the string. So in a case like that, you kind of have a lower limit. So a piano is bound by upper limit and lower limit of how loud it is. So within that, you have to give the impression of all these dynamic changes. And there's many, many ways you can do that. For example, if you have a long place in a piece where it's getting louder, and it's getting louder, and it's getting louder, and the composer's like, crescendo, get louder, get louder, get louder, and then you're already at like fortissimo, and then you have to, and then you have even more louder, you want to crescendo even more. It's saying to crescendo, but obviously you're pretty close to the max. Well, there's a few tips you can kind of do. One tip is don't max. If you know you have a long way to go, hold back, right? Like if you're crescendoing, and you know you're going to be crescendoing for the next 2 minutes, right? And it's going to be, crazy at the end. Maybe you shouldn't, even if he writes fortissimo or the composer writes fortissimo earlier on, if you know you have to keep crescendoing after that, you might basically hold back. So even if it says 3 fortes, you might only play 1. Kind of keep it down for longer so you still have room to grow, because a lot of the perception that people have of how loud something is and how much it's growing depends on the relative dynamics of two things. So if you kind of hold back on the crescendo and kind of spread it out more, you won't max yourself out too early and end up, at that maximum. Another tip you can do is you can kind of do a trick. And this trick is basically if you have to crescendo and you have to crescendo again and you have to crescendo again and you're kind of at that max already, what you can do is do a subito drop in dynamic. So subito is like piano speak, music speak for suddenly. So suddenly drop down and crescendo. So you're crescendoing, and then if you have to like start another crescendo, you could immediately take the dynamics down a few notches and then continue the crescendo. So for example, let me give an example of that. Let's say you just make something up. You can kind of create an illusion of continuing to crescendo beyond that maximum of the piano by crescendoing, and then when you can get a chance, subito drop down in dynamic level. So get quieter and then keep crescendoing. So you're basically going louder, 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 drop louder, 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 drop louder, louder. So you can continuously have that feeling of expansion, but what you're really doing is instead of going up and hitting that ceiling limit of where the piano or instrument can't exceed, you're kind of going up toward it, dropping and coming up toward it, dropping and coming up toward it, so you still have that kind of expansion. The same thing can probably be done with decrescendoing, but I don't know I'm not even sure if it can be done. It probably can be, but one of the better tricks for getting quiet that I found, that I often use, I think, is basically just making sure you don't get too soft too quickly. I think the drop down and crescendo trick works for crescendoing. I don't know if it'll work for decrescendoing. You can try. I don't know if it'll work so well for that. So for that one, you're kind of limited to the first trick, which is basically make sure you kind of spread it out. So if you know you're going to have to come down and come down and come down, stay louder a little bit. I'm thinking about this. Maybe you can do the second trick where you can crescendo by coming up a little bit and then coming down. But I think that might be more jarring, so it probably won't work well. And if it does, it won't probably work in many situations. So scrap the second one for the decrescendoing thing. Just remember, you can try it, but who knows if it'll work or not. But a key for the decrescendoing part is to make sure you don't get too quiet too soon. If you're already at your bass floor, if you're you can't really get much quieter than that without risking dropping notes off, and that's just a no. So what you want to do is, if you want to decrescendo, start louder. And then you have room to get quieter. So that's kind of an important, so relativity Relativity. We're not talking Einstein stuff here. We're talking relativity in the dynamic levels can be very, very important. And when you're crescendoing, again, that second tip, you can kind of drop down in crescendo. Again, you can try it with the decrescendo things. It might work sometimes. I don't think it'll work much, if at all. Give it a try though if you want. Another thing to think about when you're playing the piano and other instruments too is that dynamics aren't only the decibel level, but it's also the feel, as we've kind of talked about. And the feel can very closely be related to articulation and how you're playing the notes. So articulation is like how you're touching the notes, right? For example, you can play something loudly, but still have a calm feeling that's often associated with being piano, being quiet. So for example, I could play that same bit there, pretty loud decibel-wise, but still have a very, very calm feeling. What you can do to help get project out and really kind of play loudly but still piano is to play legato. That helps. Also play deeply into the notes. If I were to be smashing on each of the notes and just kind of hitting them, the feel would be completely different. Right? Détaché, it's not connected, it's not legato, and it's being smashed. It sounds bad. You could play it loudly though, but connect it playing deeply into the keys. And it has a completely different feel. I mean, I don't think many people would say that's piano, but you could say that it's maybe mezzo forte. Here's a tip for quiet pieces in general. Don't be afraid to sing out, especially the melodic line. It's very, very, very hard, if you're playing with the correct, like articulation stuff, to make a melodic line, the melody of a piece, too loud, even if it's a quiet piece. You could play, I don't know, I'll just play any kind of a piece. I'll just make something up. Melodic line there pretty loudly, but because the rest of the piece was quiet, and then with the articulation that I was using, it still comes off as just singing out the line, even though it was being played pretty loudly. So don't be afraid, especially when you're playing quiet pieces, to sometimes bring out the line, the melodic line, louder than you might feel comfortable. Now, obviously, there's a limit. You can't be like, there's a point at which it's like, that's a little bit. But you'd be surprised. I think that a lot of times people can play and bring out the melodic line in a soft piece much more than they think they can. They think, oh, it's got to be quiet, And in reality, you can bring it out more than you probably think that you can. Anyways, these are some tips that hopefully they're a little helpful, because they're things that I think I often use a lot when I'm performing. Not only classical pieces, but pieces that I make up and stuff as well, because dynamics are such an integral part of playing the piano and playing music. It can change the feel and all that stuff, but you have to kind of sometimes use some of these tricks and tips to be able to use the piano and music to its fullest, right? Because there are physical limitations to a piano. There's a loudest you can play basically, and there's a softest you can play when the hammers don't even hit the strings. So anyway, hope that was helpful. Share, like, favorite, subscribe, hit the notification bell, smash the like button again. Well, only smash it enough to make it turn blue. You don't want to disable it. That'd be bad. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.